can look at. Okay,
Yeah,
so
no problem.
thank you for joining. We are now discussing about security gates. We have this product discovery scheduled for this iteration. And then in the next one, probably 12.0, we'll schedule the actual implementation of the first step, the MVC, for this feature. So Kyle, you said that you want to discuss about that. You have questions, so please.
Yeah. So first, just kind of a quick question. We have two issues kind of going right now. We have one security gate for merge requests, but then we also have the product discovery. Is the idea just the product discovery is kind of the initial one, and then the second one will be more where we address kind of a design implementation, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so let me explain a little how we deal with product discoveries. This is not very recent, but not so old. So it's a process that we introduced a few months ago in order to ensure that we have time to think about the feature and to design it properly. It's not just, it was driven by UX at the beginning, but I want engineers to be involved in a product discovery as well. So the idea is that we take one iteration on big issues and big topics in order to ensure that we have all the information we need, that we check all the possible technical implications that may prevent you from implementing the feature. What we want to avoid, and that's the main goal of a product discovery, is that we start with an issue that is quite well defined, high level, but then during the development, and we just have 3 weeks to develop this feature, engineers figure out that it's not possible to do what has been considered by UX, by product at the very beginning of this process. So it's just a matter of splitting the design work, the thinking about it, and then the real implementation. Normally, product discoveries are targeting a feature, but they're not limited to the very first iteration on it. So that's why normally in a product discovery, we discuss also on the possible next steps in order to have an holistic view on the feature itself. Even if we already know that a specific feature, a specific option or part of the story will not be shipped in the first iteration. Clearly, at the end of the product discovery, what we want as an output is a very clear understanding, high level, of the full feature that we want to implement in the future, and a very specific design and agreement about the implementation for the next first step, for the next iteration. Clearly, this will not make the other issue, the implementation issue, UX ready automatically, and designers can jump in and tune it a little more as a standard issue, when it's scheduled. But at least they have a very strong understanding and a very strong starting point coming from the product discovery. Also, from the product discovery, we normally create multiple issues if we already designed the next steps. So we already have issues defined for the next steps. And we can collect them all in an epic, obviously, and see, okay, this is what we envision. We don't need to go into too many details in that in those issues, because they will be scheduled later. So we put everything we can put designs there, just propose the designs, and then they will be revisited as soon as they are scheduled. So back to your question, the product discovery is the first pass, the first step, and the other issue you can see is the real implementation. So in the product discovery, we don't expect to ship any code. We may create a POC in case, but it will not be part of the product, will not be available to users. With the second issue, that will be the real implementation. So at the end of the second issue, we expect the feature, the MVC for the feature, to be into the product, publicly available to our users and customers. Does it clarify the approach?
Yeah, it does. And I've been reading through mostly the product discovery one, and I caught up a bit with the other one for security gates with merge requests. And so kind of my first question is around one of the areas of confusion that we have. It's that you say our security paradigm states that we don't want to make pipeline fail and block the entire development process if a vulnerability is found, right?
Yeah, exactly.
However, the feedback that we're kind of working with is that unsecure code should not be allowed unless previously approached by the security team, right? This is considered a strict requirement by some customers and also a must-have by analysts.
Yeah.
So reading through both of them, there is a little bit of disagreement, right, about the pipeline and the merge request and where it is okay to have a stop. Like, for example, I think Philip was saying that the pipeline is like it's okay for the merge request to not go through, but not stopping the pipeline. Do you want to just?
Yeah, actually, I'm not really sharing that approach. I see it a little too technical, and users will not care if they are blocked because of the merge request job or because of an approval or something like that. What we want to ensure, and this is the security paradigm that we have at GitLab, is that we are not slowing down people because they need to wait for something or they need to, absolutely change something in their code before they can merge it. So it's up to them to define, them obviously, I mean the developers, but also the security team or the compliance team, to define if they want to take a risk, if they want to approve something because maybe it's a false positive, and then go through the path and merge it. So technically, GitLab should not prevent users to take decisions and to take responsibilities to say, yes, I know this is a problem. It's very clear in the UI, in the flow. GitLab tells me that there is something that I have to take care of. I took a look. I'm taking the decision, the conscious decision to proceed with the flow. So I will not slow down the velocity of my development of my company because GitLab is taking decisions for me. Okay. That's the main concept. So mainly, you said it right. So we started saying, okay, everything is just informative, and we're not enforcing any way to block the flow. And then obviously big companies that have obviously compliance very, very strictly looking at security, and they have established processes, are saying, yeah, but we really need to be sure that developers don't have the ability to just say, oh, we don't care. There are security warnings, but we don't look at them, and so we click merge. And then we are not liable for that because it's not a conscious decision. We didn't take any action specifically. You can just say, okay, yeah, there was an information there, but we didn't look at. So what we agreed on to proceed with is the security gates. The idea is that if there are no new vulnerabilities in the merge request, then it's fine. Then no action is taken, and the flow is exactly the same as we have now. So they will see, green report in the security section, and they can merge their code. We don't care about this case because it's not impacting security at all. So we are totally fine with it. But if we have a strong reason to consider that merge request unsafe for the code base, then there is exactly where we need to jump in as a feature in the product. So the idea is that if the security level of the vulnerabilities is high enough, and we are considering critical severity to be the trigger for that, instead of just saying, okay, we show you the critical vulnerability in the UI, but you can still click on merge, you can say, okay, let's enable an automatic rule that will add the security team or compliance team or whatever the user wants to set as a mandatory approver for the merge request. We have now this feature, so you can define approvers, but not just how many you want in general, but also I would need one from QA, for example, one from security. So you can define multiple groups, and you can see that they are required, at least, let's say, one for each of those groups. The concept is users will be able to enable this feature or not. So if they don't want to use the security gates, they are totally fine. This will be the default. And the flow will be exactly the same as today, even if they have critical vulnerabilities. But if they really need to, if they really want to, they can enable this feature. And it means that they can define this additional approval rule, setting the rule like, the approval group is the security team, or is this list of users that they know are security professionals or compliance team, whatever they want. So it's very flexible. We are not obviously tagging security in any way. They will define what is security approval for them. And they will tick a box or something like that saying this rule will be enabled only if the merge request contains one or more critical items. So vulnerabilities with severity critical. So the flow will be exactly the same if they have no vulnerabilities. They will not even know that there is this rule because it's disabled by default. As soon as the report will show a critical element, a critical vulnerability, the rule will automatically be enabled by the system. And then it's not something different than just having this rule enabled by default all the time. So having the rule enabled all the time is something you can already do now with the current feature. It's not security related. But what we want to solve with this approach of security gates is that this rule will not block all the merge requests. Otherwise, if you want to do it now with the current feature, you can create a rule, say security should approve it, but this will apply all the time. So even if you introduce 0 new vulnerabilities, security has to approve. And that's terrible because you don't want to ping security if there is no need, because there is absolutely no reason to call them in. This will slow down security team because they will receive a ton of requests from developers to say, can you approve this merge request that is not introducing any problem? So it seems a nonsense. It also will slow down developers because if they are introducing no new vulnerabilities, they will still have to wait for the security team to jump in and approve. That's why we feel that the rule should be optional and be and be triggered only on that specific condition. Severity critical. Does it make sense to you?
Yes. Can I repeat back kind of where I think we're at and how I'm understanding it? And
Yep.
If you could tell me if we're aligned and if this is true. So this is how I'm understanding it. The desired outcome of the security gate is to flag vulnerabilities so security analysts are aware before merge request finalizes as approved. The merge request with the vulnerability, or discovered in the pipeline that has a vulnerability, is escalated to a security team as designated ahead of time when the feature was enabled. The strict requirement that you had put in the issue for kind of what the users that we're working towards is that the designated security analyst must approve, similar to our multiple approval rules. And I'll come back to that in a second. But if the eligible security analyst does not approve, the merge request will not be pushed because it won't pass the gate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, go on.
If you're using the multiple approver groups for merge requests, this will be automatically managed by the current flow. So as soon as you enable this additional rule, you have a list of groups that have to approve. And if you are not having approvals from all those groups, then the merge request is blocked. So we are leveraging an existing feature. We are just introducing the fact that the rule, a group of approvers can be enabled or disabled automatically based on a condition that is the security status of the merge request itself.
Okay. And, and kind of, we're at a high level. So when that block has occurred, those vulnerabilities have been found, and the criteria is correctly pinging the security analyst, what do we want to happen next? What do we want them to do? Do we want developers to maybe be pinged first to take care of it? Or can you talk through what's ideal?
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't expect a security team to be pinged automatically in any way. Um, it is exactly the same as any other approver group that is set with the current feature. So it just, the merge request is blocked. You can see in the top of the merge request that you still need to have approvals from this group or this other group. And so it's up to the developer. This is quite important to me because of two main reasons. The first one is that we don't want to flood the security team with notifications about merge requests that need their attention, if there is no need for that. Maybe the developer just wants to fix the problem by himself. And that's a very good flow because you say, oh, I cannot merge it because I'm introducing a critical thing. So what I can do, I can ping security and ask for help or ask for review or ask them to approve because it's a false positive, I don't know, something like that. Or I can take actions and I can go through. They can mainly do two things. They can fix the problem in the code. So in the next run of the pipeline, the security report will report zero vulnerabilities, zero new vulnerabilities. And so the rule will be automatically disabled because the condition to trigger the conditional rule will not be there anymore. So in that case, no need to ping anyone. Developers can continue working as usual.
Yes.
Or they can dismiss the vulnerability by themselves. And that's something we are considering. So at the moment, developers can dismiss vulnerabilities. And in that case, they are taking responsibility of saying, I know that there is a security risk, a security problem. And I'm saying, oh, it's not. I checked it, it's not. Maybe in the future, it will be just something that a set of users will be able to do. And so people can define, okay, only security people can dismiss vulnerabilities. Maybe we are still investigating possible options. But for now, we want to allow developers to provide this kind of feedback. It's different from having no feedback at all, because if you have a merge request saying there is a problem, but the merge button is available, you can say, oh, I just didn't know about that. I didn't check the widget or something like that. But if you have to take a real action, like click on the vulnerability and click on the dismiss button, then you know what you are doing. So you are taking your call and you are saying, even if I'm not security, I know 100% that this is not a problem and I approve it. In that case, if you dismiss the vulnerability count will be back to zero. And so the additional approver will be automatically disabled. So even in that case, security people will not be involved. In case you really want to involve security, it's up to the developer, to the reviewer, to the maintainer, whoever is assigned to the merge request in that specific moment. And they can ping them in the merge request itself, saying, oh, there is this problem. Can you jump in and take your call? So dismiss or approve as is, create a follow-up, or say, no, I will not approve, so you really need to fix this problem. And so security is involved. But as any other additional rule, it's up to the specific flow for the specific company that is using the feature to define how to engage the security professionals or the compliance or the quality team or whoever is part of the approval rule group.
Okay, so the spotlight is still on the developer. It's still they're the one who needs to dismiss the vulnerability that was found. And when I restated earlier to you, I said that I used the word escalation. But is awareness a better way of thinking about the terms of the security team and like, because we're surfacing up these vulnerabilities. Maybe they've set the criteria in, right, for certain criteria to be surfaced up to them, and it's there for their awareness. They see it, but the onus is still on the developer to fix it. And once they do fix it, there is no problem. Or once it's dismissed, it's gone, and not requiring the approval of the security analyst. Is
Yeah.
that true? So then what are situations that might require a security analyst to do anything further past just being aware of escalated sort of vulnerability?
No, yes, I suggest to avoid using the escalation term because it's not really escalated, not automatically at least. It is just something that may happen, but is not a process that is defined by GitLab itself. It's up to developers and the process in the company that is using GitLab that can define if it's an escalation or something different. The security professional can jump in any case. It's not just awareness, because developers may be required to ask the security professional to take the action, for example, to dismiss it or to write the fix. I don't know, that's another option. Maybe in some companies, when you have a security problem and you're not able to solve it by yourself, you're requested to ping in a security developer, and the security developer, the security engineer, will jump in and will fix your code. So maybe this is a possible flow. We really don't want to enforce a workflow with the GitLab product itself. So it's very open. It's just a matter of, you will not have the merge button available if there is no approval by the team you defined, let's say the security team, because you enable this rule explicitly. And so we want to be sure that no one is able to click the merge unless an action is taken on critical items. And as said before, actions can be dismissed, and everyone with developer access or more can dismiss a vulnerability or fix the problem, or just say, I'm fine with it. I saw it. I don't want to mark it as a false positive because I just want to create a follow-up and say, I accept, I don't know, the risk is critical, the severity is critical, but it's so important to merge that specific code to the master branch for business reasons that I cannot accept, that the security is taking over. I know that, it's very specific, probably for a few cases, and normally we want to enforce security. We don't want people to say security is not important. But we cannot say from a product perspective, there is absolutely no case at all that allows us to say no, we block you. No way you can click a button and go further. That's against our security paradigm. So it's up to the process. It's up to the company that is using GitLab. It's not up to GitLab. That's the main difference.
Okay. And I guess the next question then, because it is kind of more around dismissing vulnerabilities, and it goes back to the developer, as you said, in that flow. Something else I saw in the security gates for merge request issue, I think Philip and Cindy were mentioning it, is that Philip was saying, I'd rather refine the rights on dismissing vulnerabilities and prevent developers from dismissing critical vulnerabilities. So how about that use case where that's prevent the developers from dismissing critical vulnerabilities? Yeah. What happens then? Or because then it would be the security analyst in that, and would it be dictated by a rule that they applied in, or that's sort of a conditional rule of a certain vulnerability?
Yeah, I see. That's a nice thing to consider, but in my opinion, it's not really solving the problem. Because it requires that developers will not be able to dismiss critical vulnerabilities, and that maybe is fine for some of the flows, but this should be optional as well, because in the standard, in the default flow, we want developers, at least for now, that's our call now, we want developers to be able to dismiss vulnerabilities, even critical vulnerabilities, even because we don't know if that specific company has a security team at all. Maybe they don't have. And maybe security is managed by the developer itself. So they just need to be aware of that. I also see another problem, that is, if we want to approve the dismissal of a rule, that is still something we can consider in the future. We cannot leverage the multiple approver group feature we already have in GitLab as part of the product that we already shipped. So it's building a different process that will be different in code, so it will impact our development, but will be also different in the UX. And with UX, I intend, the user flow, the user experience, not the UI. So if users are already comfortable using the multiple approver groups, they will be totally fine with this approach as well, because it's exactly the same. If they need to understand and to work with a different approach just for security, this could be harder to get up to speed with. So I think that reusing the existing feature will allow us to move faster in development, and customers to be used to it, because they may already be using the base feature we are leveraging.
Okay. And so that would, I guess it kind of comes back to this this openness of what are the rules that were created, right? And the rules sound very conditional, and very open, right? So it's kind of going to come down. Would you agree that it kind of comes down to the setup of the actual company that's using this, for example, and that they're going to apply different rules for when to be pinged for severity, who's can approve it, if it's a certain severity level that a developer can't dismiss it. So these are sort of would you say that because these are kind of conditional rules, would this kind of be part of
let's say
configuration, I guess?
We can consider it in the future, even if we have to remember that we normally want to use conventions over configurations. And we don't want to provide, a million options to users, because they will be lost and they will not know which is the best practice that we want to enforce. So at least for the first iteration, but I feel that this could be enough. Obviously, we need to get some feedback about that. Is that critical is enough? Because think about that. If you just want to make it, for any merge request, even if security vulnerabilities are not spotted, you can set up a rule without any condition. So what you already can do now. And it will be blocking every merge request. Available or not, I don't know. Probably yes in a few cases, but it's already supported. So we don't have to put more code on it. So what you want to block? Probably yes, you want to block critical. That's the main thing. And so we're fine saying you can set the rule and say for security reasons, that means critical only. Users may want to say, yes, but I also want to consider medium. I want also to consider low severities. Do we really want to support a drop-down or something like that to define these kind of rules? Not as the first step, I think. Maybe yes in the future. But for now, let's just start with critical. It seems to be enough. I talked also with our security director, and she agrees that mainly critical is a good start. If we have to pick something, it's a good start. So we can also iterate later and add more configuration. What I feel it is quite important is that this optional approach to approval rules is not just related to security. Because here I see something very valuable. We are not introducing this flow for security, but tomorrow we can consider introducing it for quality, for example. We have code quality that is a different feature that runs on top of the code, and it's not related to security at all. So maybe people want to say, okay, if the quality degrades, I want to ping the quality team instead. And so that's also another a similar use case. And they will set up another rule saying quality team as the target, the approval group, and when code quality degrades. And it's the same as when security, critical security issues are spotted. So that's where I think we should iterate first, having a drop-down or having a way to configure multiple reasons for the conditional approver to be triggered. And then we can refine each of those reasons with multiple levels or something like that. But I don't see it a very strong priority, at least for now, at least for the very first iterations.
Okay. So if it was just if the severity was the only criteria, for example, for like kind of the MVC or MVP product of that, it's basically that some admin or some main user comes to turn that on. And is it just across the board, just for all projects at the organization, or are they able to set like what groups that's on? What level is that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So let's say that I see the value. As usual, we can start with the project level approach, and then you can move to the group level and then to the instance level. Or we can evaluate if group level is the most important thing. I expect, since it's related to security and compliance, I expect that the group level, that the project level is not enough. Because if you have, 100 projects in your organization, and your organization is a group on GitLab.com, for example, you probably want to apply the same paradigm, the same compliance processes to all your projects, and you don't want to set them up one by one in all the projects. At the same time, if you do it at the group level, it doesn't allow you to define different processes, different flows for the different projects. So normally I see a value in having all the three levels. We can debate which is the most important one to start with. I see probably group level or project level. Instance level is something that can come later, because normally you don't have hundreds of groups in your instance. And even if you have, maybe you are providing services to different internal customers to your company, and so they may want to have different rules. Say that since you are building this feature, or probably we want to do that, we want to build this feature on top of existing GitLab feature, that is the different approver groups. I don't actually know now, and sorry about that, if we already have this feature available at the group level. So if this feature is only available at the project level and we want to build on top of this feature, we need to go where the feature is. And then obviously we can debate, we can engage other teams, we can implement it on ourselves to say, no, okay, let's go and let's move to group level, because it's very important. But this will block the development if we have to do that first. So in that case, the project level choice is the right one. Absolutely. Otherwise, we can try to figure it out.
Okay. And so then every critical vulnerability, let's say if it was at the project level or above it or whatnot, they turn it on, they turn the switch on, and then what happens is they get notified. Then that's when that dismissal process comes. Or on the side of security, where do they see and where do they see it? Like, where do they see that these vulnerabilities exist? Is it only in the merge request widget, or do they have another place where this?
The vulnerability management doesn't need to be changed. So it could be in the merge request widget, it could be in the group dashboard, could be at the project level. We don't really care, because the merge request itself will just check the status of the security report for the very specific merge request, and will enforce the approval or not based on that specific result. Vulnerabilities are shared between multiple places in the product, but the merge request will just check. So when you load the merge request will check the security reports in that specific page and will take decisions based on that. One last important thing I'd like to address, because we really need to figure it out in the product discovery, is which is the approach we want to take, which is the experience we want to give to our users when they have to enable this. So now we talked about how users will be impacted by this feature when they are developing software, but how can they enable it? I see two possible options. They are both probably valid, so I'd like to get some feedback about that. The first one is focus it as an option, an alternative flow in the multiple approver group feature. So if you want to set it up, you go to the merge request settings, where you can define multiple groups of approvers. And then, when you define a new one, you can say, okay, it's a regular one. Yes, fine. Or, oh no, this one is an optional one. And so you say, okay, this is optional. And the trigger is security or quality or whatever it would be. This is option number one. It will not be security driven, but will be more natural probably, because you can set up all your rules, and when you define all your rules, you also define if the rule is specific to security or not. The second approach is security first. So it will be a security setting in the project. So it will not be the existing, the standard merge request setting, but will be a security setting. Say, okay, this is an additional list of rules that will be set with security in mind since the beginning. And then obviously in the backstage, the backend will merge the two lists and will create the complete list of rules that need to be applied. This is good if you think that this process will be done by a security professional, because the security will expect probably to have a security settings page where they can set all the security options for their projects. But on the other side, it means that if you want to introduce quality gates, for example, in the future, you cannot manage them in the very same page because it's not related to security. So you need to create another first-class page with quality settings, I don't know, something like that, and duplicate the very same logic there. Also, if you go to the merge request approval rules list in the merge request settings, you may be not aware that there are additional conditional rules that are there. So sorry, give me a second. Just a second, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm back.
Doors.
Sorry, there was someone at the door.
No problem.
Yeah, so that's my question. Do we want to go with the security-focused idea to have security settings somewhere, so security professionals will be able to have high-level overview on all the security settings for the project, or do we want to go in the more natural way, so put things where the similar things, the features that we are leveraging for the implementation already are? I'd say probably the second one, so the merge request settings. But it's a shame because I'd like to provide a security focused settings page at some point.
Okay.
And maybe we can find a solution that will allow security professionals to manage in one point, and on the other one we can just list them and see what is happening. And that's probably not the perfect solution because each company will manage this process differently. Maybe they say, security team is in charge of setting security settings, or maybe, maintainers, owners of the project will define what they expect from the security standpoint. And then the security team is just, an actor that will jump in when needed, but they're not owning the security settings. So yeah, let's keep the discussion open on that because I'm quite not fully sold to both. There are benefits and problems in both approaches.
Okay. I know, do we have a hard cutoff or do you have a few minutes?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. I think what could help us kind of flesh this out is just kind of getting some flows together of these different scenarios, and and then they can kind of help us see what directions we want to take. Like, for example, like in the flow that now the developer has to dismiss this, and then once he dismisses them, then that changes to like one route that the developer could take is dismiss all the vulnerabilities that came up. And then that removes the security's approval needing. Or there could be that case, though, that we talked about earlier where, the security that the settings were such that they had to approve for a certain critical level.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think that if we use this approach of the merge request approver groups, the only thing that is really on our focus is checking the current status of the security report in the merge request widget in that specific moment. So we don't really care if it's because they are dismissed or they are solved. It's just a matter of, do we have critical still there? Yes. We enable the rule. Do we have no critical items there? No matter why we don't have, okay, we disable the rule. So I'm totally for having multiple scenarios to evaluate if this is a good approach. But from a technical point of view, let's say from an engineering implementation point of view, the only thing that is missing now is this check against the security report and enable or disable the rule dynamically based on what we see in the report. So that's the only missing piece if we want to reuse all the other components, because we already have multiple approvers, we already have dismissal of vulnerabilities, we already have security reports in the merge request. So all these other pieces are already in place.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Do you have any other question about?
Yeah, just like maybe if we just a list a few user scenarios that may come up that we could kind of just create some flows around. So one is user executes pipeline and vulnerabilities are found. Developer needs to address vulnerabilities. A security analyst is required to approve. So we could build a flow in that and see what kind of directions could go from there. Is that's one that exists? Security analyst establishes conditions and rules and enables security gate. That's one we can work around.
Yep, that makes sense.
What other one would you add to that?
Oh, let's say it's quite, there could be a few, but they all end up saying you need to remove the problem one way or the other, and that's, bring the count of critical vulnerabilities to 0 in some way, dismissal, code changes, or you need to, approve the exception. And approve the exception is only on the security team. So I see two possible main flows. The first one is you have a problem, you fix it one way or the other, you don't have the problem anymore. As a developer, I mean. The second flow is you have a problem, you cannot or you don't want to take actions to resolve the problem by yourself, and you're stuck because you need to, to get it approved by a security professional. And so you have to ping the security professional, and the security professional can solve the problem, say option A, or option B, approve as is and create a follow-up or whatever it is. So these are the two main flows, and the second flow can be split into two on its own.
Okay. And I think like working through these flows can help just kind of identify where the information architecture of all this is. Like when you say that security analyst gets pinged, we can think then like, well, where is that going to happen? Is it in the merge request widget or?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Okay. I think that, it's quite, the standard flow that is, GitLab is not enforced. So whatever it is, you can ping in the merge request. You can write an email with a link to the merge request. It's not enforced by the product. So obviously the best practice is ping it in the merge request, assign the merge request to the security professional, so it will show up in their assignments or whatever it is. But it's not, as I said before, it's just a best practice. It's not enforced. If you want to, step up and cry in the office, say, please help me, that should be allowed. Let's say we don't want to, that's obviously joking.
That would be the process.
That's to say, exactly. We don't want to enforce the process to ping someone else, and we don't want to do it automatically, because the developer is responsible to know if the security professional needs to be involved. maybe you can just fix it on yourself by your own. And
okay.
Security professionals should not be overloaded by something that is not really needed from them.
Okay. Anything to add otherwise to this conversation that we didn't chat about that?
Yeah, I would say very important, even if not related to the design discussion. Engineers, both front end and back end, are to be involved in this discussion as well, to check that the proposal and our approach is feasible, and that we are proposing something that is possible to achieve in one iteration, or if not, how we can reduce the scope, how we can tune it in order to be sure that it is something we can afford in one iteration.
Okay.
What I want to avoid is that, we're saying that those rules could be optional, but because of how the rules are implemented now in the backend, maybe it's not possible to make them optional. Just obviously making assumptions that are out of the blue, or we need to change the database and impact the database structure a lot if you want to make them optional. So it requires database engineers to jump in and to validate our proposal. It will require 2 iterations, maybe, because one iteration is just for all the backstage changes, and then another one to build the feature on top of it. So those engineering implementation considerations should be done in the product discovery as well. So I normally see a first phase where everyone is contributing to the idea and to envision which is the solution to the problem we want to implement. But then, the last 2 weeks of the product discovery, engineers can jump in heavily and say, yes, it is doable. Or I need to get more information about these rules, how they work. And so they can dedicate some time to check the code base and to see how it's going. Because the feature we want to leverage is not a feature we implemented as part of the secure group. So I expect secure group engineers, to have no idea how these rules are implemented. And so they need to take a look at the code, and they need to figure out if something is possible or not, given the actual implementation.
Okay.
And that's it, I think.
Yeah. Well, perfect.
Okay.
Thanks for walking through that. I appreciate it. Super helpful.
If you can, please move all your notes and considerations in the issue itself, because it's awesome to have a video for this conversation, but it should be in the issue. At least the final conclusions or the questions that we want to answer should be in the issue. So feel free to update it, and as soon as you have some preliminary design or suggestion or proposal, put there in the issue, because it's very important to keep issues up to date.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Kyle.
All right.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.